commercial-free Catholic Charismatic channel.
He's strengthening the faith of so many people.
To promote the gift of church teaching. Dedicated for the new evangelization.
God's blessings on your work. May God bless and prosper you.
Shalom World, God's own channel.
I think a beautiful case illustration. I know of a guy who was just a hellion of a kid. This guy got involved in all kinds of weird, kind of esoteric practices. He was a real pleasure seeker, and his mom was a great Christian. But this kid was just, wow, this kid was wild. And the kid moves in with his girlfriend. They have a child out of wedlock. And, you know, the mom is crying and praying and pleading and, you know, trying to talk to the kid. And the more she talked to the kid, he just kept moving further and further away. And so she would pray and cry, and then she would talk, then she wouldn't talk. And, you know, she just, for years and years and years, she struggled. Well, one day, her kid, and I don't know how this happened, but her kid heard some really good preaching. And it really struck his heart. But nothing happened immediately. But he thought about what he had heard. And then he was sitting by himself one day, kind of thinking all this through. And then there came a moment where he gave his life to Jesus. Yeah, the kid turned completely around. In fact, the conversion was so thorough, he became a priest. Yeah, and that conversion was so thorough, he became a bishop. And then with that for a little while, he became St. Augustine. And for 20, 30 years, his mother's heart was broken as she prayed and fasted and wept for him and shared the word. She spoke to him. He didn't always like it, but she spoke to him. And then she knew there were moments she needed to stop. Then she'd go at it again. And she was guided by the Spirit. Here's an interesting thing. You know, within a year after Augustine gave his life to the Lord, Monica died. It's like her whole life was to get this crazy kid into the merciful arms of Jesus. And she knew it. And that's what she lived for. That was the goal of her life, was to have her son safely in the arms of the Lord. And wow, she did it by the grace of God. But even Monica could not control the moment when Augustine would turn to the Lord. And I would suppose there had to be times, 5, 10, 15 years into it, you kind of say, is this going anywhere? But brothers and sisters, we cannot give up. We cannot give up on the people who, from our human perspective, seem so hard-hearted and so far away. Here's another thing. Maybe you have spoken to somebody once and they dismissed you. Maybe you've spoken to that person a second time and they ridiculed you. Maybe you've spoken to them a 10th time and they roll their eyes and say, please don't bring this up again. How do you know that the 11th time won't be the moment? You don't know that it will be, but you don't know that it won't be. Now, St. Paul, in his second letter to the Corinthians, just a short paragraph that I think says so much to us. And he says, this is 2 Corinthians chapter 5, and I'm starting with verse 14. Actually, I'm going to start with verse 13, because I'm sure this seems very appropriate. And here's what he says. If we are out of our minds, it is for God. And I'm sure many of your relatives would agree with that passage, that you are indeed out of your mind. But if we are out of our minds, it's for God. And if we are rational, it is for you. For the love of Christ impels us, once we have come to the conviction that since one died for all, therefore all have died. He, Christ, indeed died for all, so that those who live might no longer live for themselves, but for him who for their sake died and was raised. So in essence, what St. Paul is saying is that once we have experienced Jesus Christ, once we know that he is, he is the truth, he is the life, he is the way, once we know that, we have got to do everything in our power to convince other people. Now, how do we do that? At a practical level, how do we help people come to know about Jesus? We'll look at a couple things very, very simply. Here's a little bit of mathematics that I find works great in evangelization. Everybody, we're going to do this real quick together. Everybody, please find your nose. Do you see? It's kind of a large object sticking out the front of your head. Okay, you got that? Okay, please go to both sides of your nose and you'll find two large flaps on the side of your head. Okay? Okay. How many of those do you have? Two. Okay, good. Good. Okay, if you had more or less, we'd have to get you to first aid right away. Okay, go back to your nose. Just below your nose, you'll find a large gaping hole. Okay, how many? Just one. Okay, so you have two ears and just one mouth. I'm telling you, friends, if we would use them in the proportion that the Creator gave them, evangelization would go a lot easier. And St. James says we should be quick to listen and slow to speak. But I'll tell you, and I'm guilty of this sometimes. Sometimes I am so ready to give my little zinger that I'm not really listening to the person. I hope they either take a breath or have a heart attack so that I can now say my brilliant little thing. That is not really listening to people. That's playing some kind of a game. Listen to people, because a couple things will happen. And this isn't religion, this is just human psychology. They have done various studies and they have found something interesting. That when a person feels that they have really been listened to, the first thing they say is that the person feels validated. You may not agree with what they're saying, but at least you're showing them the respect. You're listening, you're nodding, okay, I understand. And that alone is such a healing component of ministry, to listen to people. The other thing that happens, they have found, is that when a person really feels that they've been listened to, their capacity to trust the other person greatly goes up. Now that would be important, wouldn't it? Because when you've been listening and you've been listening and you've been listening, there will come a moment when you get to speak. And because you have listened patiently, their heart is going to be more open to what you have to say. So take a few more breaths, slow down, and honestly listen to people more. Because as they talk to you, and I mean, I've heard some people just ranting and raving. I hate the church. Rah, 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 rah. I mean, they go nuts. But if you listen carefully, you will hear in their pain or disappointment or guilt or whatever it is. And as you're listening to them, the Holy Spirit will begin to guide you. Say this. Share this. Tell them this. As you listen to people, you will also hear the Spirit giving you guidance, so that when it is your turn to talk, you'll be able to say things that just aren't your own flesh or your own wit and wisdom, but is really guided and anointed by the Spirit. So the first thing we need to do is listen, but we also need to speak. And Pope Paul VI said that there is no authentic evangelization if the name and the life and the ministry of Jesus Christ of Nazareth, the Son of God, is not spoken. So when people say, boy, you sure seem happy lately. What's your secret? Well, I'm just trying to, look a little more brighter on things. Don't chicken out. Tell them about Jesus. You don't have to beat it into them. You don't have to scream at them. You don't have to, just blah, 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 blah. Tell them about Jesus. Well, what do I say? Well, I don't know. What's in your heart? What's in your heart? Do you love Jesus? Do you believe in him? Has he ever helped you in any way? Is your life any way better for following Jesus? Tell them those things. You don't have to have all the answers. Just tell them those things. So we listen, we speak, and as Ralph said, we probably need to invite people to respond. Now that will happen uniquely with each person's way. It doesn't always have to be, repeat after me. I, fill in your name. I will follow Jesus all the days of my life, and I will serve him faithfully forever. Congratulations, you've just been saved. It can be a little more fluid than that. Everybody's going to respond to the Lord, some with words, some with gestures, any way it works. But we do need to, because some people don't know what to do with this. Some people don't know. They have been so far away from God for so long that they honestly don't know how to get back. And you're probably the person who could say, well, why don't we just take a minute right now and pray? Well, we're not even in the church. Oh, that's okay. That's okay. Oh, I haven't prayed in 20 years. Well, maybe I can help you a little bit. Oh, what am I going to say? I don't know. Just tell them what's in your heart. Keep it down to earth. Keep it simple. Keep it plain. But invite people to respond to Jesus. I think another thing that can often help us is the use of charisms. We often think that charisms are used for a prayer meeting or a conference or something of that nature, but charisms also can be used in just evangelization. And the Lord at times will give you maybe a word or a prophecy, or you'll feel led to pray with somebody, and wonder of wonders, they actually get healed. I mean, charisms are God's way of kind of getting to people's hearts. Now, I think a lot of us say, well, if we do the charismatic thing, we're going to freak everybody out. I don't think so. I think sometimes we freak people out because we're so weird. But I think the charisms themselves, there's nothing weird about them. They're of God. And that person, whether they know it or not, is longing for the things of God. And so you can quietly pray in tongues. You can say, I just feel like God is with us right now. And if we could hear him speak, I think he would say this to you. Kind of put it in a context. Don't have to get, thus saith the Lord God Most High Almighty. That's probably not going to work, in a checkout line. Just keep it natural, keep it down to earth, and just share. Trust that the Spirit of God is going to lead you. Let me just close with I think the most profound story I've ever heard. Actually comes from the Gulf Coast, and it's a story about a guy who retired from up north and wanted to spend his days fishing off one of the piers on the Gulf Coast. And the story goes he's kind of a crotchety old guy and wasn't a real social butterfly, but he just loved to fish. And one day, there was a pelican in the rocks of the pier who had caught a hook in its jowl, and its wing was all tied up with fish line. So this guy really didn't have much use for people, but he felt sorry for the bird. So he took his big fish net and dragged the pelican up there and got out of his toolbox a little pliers and got the hook out, got the fish line off, and nobody's looking. He gave him some of his fish bait and gave it to the pelican. Well, this guy had a friend for life. Every time he went fishing, the pelican would kind of, wander up to him and stand there, and he'd give him a couple bait fish. Well, a couple weeks later, there was another pelican that had been hurt. Nothing too bad, but he got that pelican, and I don't remember, something like, a piece of one of those plastic beer wrapper things around his foot or something like that. He cut the thing free, gave him some fish, and now he had two pelican friends. Well, people thought this was pretty funny. They started calling him Pelican Man, which used to irritate him, but everybody thought it was pretty funny. Well, then somebody else saw a pelican that had been nicked by a boat, and they gave him the pelican, and somebody else saw a pelican that had a busted wing, and they gave him the Pelican Man. And this is no joke. The guy he lived a couple blocks off the beach. He took his backyard, bulldozed it out, put a pond in there for all these ailing pelicans. And the guy, he literally devoted his whole yard. He had cages. The natural resource people came in, started providing veterinary care. And from what I understand, a couple of years ago, Pelican Man actually passed away. But the work has continued in his home. And groups do fundraisers to raise money for the pelicans. And they, when they can, they ban the bird and then, set it back free. And all these pelicans are being re-released. Now, this guy has become almost an urban legend. So people find pelicans. Everybody kind of knows, you go to Pelican Man's house. But here's the interesting thing, and this is true. It doesn't happen every day, but it happens quite regularly that a pelican will be walking down the sidewalk to Pelican Man's house, dragging a broken wing. And with that pelican is a pelican who's got a band on his arm, on his foot, who had been treated by Pelican Man. And now, I don't know how pelicans talk to each other, but somehow the pelican who had been cared for and set free, when that pelican finds another pelican with a broken wing, it says in Pelicanese, hey, there's not much I can do for you, but I know somebody near here. Let's go there. And this is no joke. It's not unusual to see pelicans walking down the street together on the way to Pelican Man's house. Brothers and sisters, that's all evangelization is. We've taken something so basic and we've tried to turn it into a science. Every one of us here, at one time or another, either had a fish hook or a broken wing. And somebody loved us very, very much. And they brought about our healing. They put their their sign on us, the cross, and then they let us fly free. Free. You go where you need to go. But as we run into others with fish hooks and broken wings, we have to take them to Pelican Man. Now, if they don't want to come with us, there's nothing we can do about that. But don't ever send anybody to Jesus. Take them to Jesus. And you are the best evidence we have of God's mercy and God's healing power. In all due respect, if God can rescue us, he can save anybody. Really, he can. So let's try to kind of bring this whole evangelization thing back to a doable level. It's about listening to people. It's about speaking with people and telling them about Jesus. It's about inviting them to respond. Sometimes using charisms can be very powerful in evangelization. But above all else, don't send anybody to Jesus. Accompany them to Jesus. And if we could do this, can you imagine how far and how quickly the old man's fire could spread? There's 7.1 billion people sharing the planet with you tonight. Many, many of them are shivering in the freezing rain in the dark while you and I sit around the old man's fire. There's nothing more to discuss. There's nothing more to debate. We don't have to form one more subcommittee to discuss this for the next 3 years. We have the fire. They need the fire. Don't be afraid to spread the fire. God bless you.
Teach everything he commanded them to teach.
New ways to communicate God's word.
Present positive images to our people.
This message of truth and salvation.
Culture of encounter.
Gospel of Christ worldwide.
Shalom World TV.
Faith-filled,
Dynamic,
virtue-building,
Commercial-free,
family-friendly,
Catholic charismatic channel to the whole world.
Promote the gift of church teaching.
Dedicated for the new evangelization.
Mentor the young into a deeper embrace of the Catholic faith.
wonderful contributions to the church.
People of prayer.
Attractive people, attractive messages.
Peace of Christ.
Promote the values of life.
This is media at its very best.
The voice of the church.
With great love.
Taking this to the next step.
Shalom World TV.
Shalom, shalom.
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 Shalom World, God's own channel.